What's going on, everybody? This is the Helping Friendly podcast on tour. We are back from tour. Some of us are en route, but many people are back from tour. We are going to do something I think that's going to be really awesome today. We're going to have our four sort of HFPod correspondents. We're going to do the live recap, and then we're also going to release this one as a podcast tomorrow on Tuesday. So if you're listening to this, that's why you hear all of us. Brian, Jonathan, Matt, how are you guys doing?
Great.
Doing great, man.
Yeah.
Jonathan, I want to ask you first because you have been couch touring all tour, as has Brian. But I want to ask you first, what do you thought about the tour so far, and how do you feel like they wrapped it up in AC yesterday?
I think embarrassment of riches is the correct term. They're coming in hot with a lot of micro jams that are really paying off, and I mean like these like sub 18-minute, 15-minute jams that are not what we were seeing at the beginning of tour, right, where we had the 25 30-minute jams. But they're constructing set lists, I think, really effectively. Particularly these Atlantic City shows, I think, have been really, really good set lists. You guys will speak more to that, having been there, I'm sure. But I think we're in a great place, and I'm excited to see where they are after a little bit of rest and trip out west.
And well, I guess speaking of going out west, we should say that this is brought to you by our friends at Shift Genuine Cannabis, based in Colorado. And we're going to see everybody at Dick's on September 5th. Is that the Sunday? September 5th?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay.
The Sunday show. Yeah.
The Sunday show. We're going to, we are going to announce the winner of our contest. And to enter the contest, go to shiftcannabis.com. You can win 2 tickets to the 30th and 31st of October. Fish will be playing in Las Vegas. If you haven't heard, you can win tickets to that and airfare and accommodations. And that's why we're all here. And Fish is going out west, and Brian's already out west, but some of us will be going out west to join Brian eventually. Well, that was long and didn't make sense. Matt, I want to ask you something about last night, because I was just writing up the review that I'm doing for Fishnet, and almost all the songs, not almost all the songs, but a lot of the songs in the first set were like 8 to 9 minutes. And like Jonathan said, they kind of had this, like, I guess I would consider a lot of those little like micro jams in there. Final Hurrah, Rogue, there's so many. Did you notice that? And do you see that as anything different from the other shows you've seen this tour, or is that pretty in line with what you've heard?
I think, yeah, I mean, in the last couple of nights, definitely since Hershey, they have moved away from the longer jams that were kind of happening earlier in the tour. But they're kind of working on the same sound that they've been building throughout the tour, and that's kind of permeating all, every little bit of the show. Last night was a great example of that, because you had, for example, like the Mike song, which was very, very of the new sound, with lots of synths and Trey using his Jedi pedal and whatnot. Didn't feel like kind of like a casual thrown off first set Mike's groove. It felt really deep, but if you look at it in the time or whatever, it didn't last that long. Same thing with Yem. I mean, Yem had a great jam and in it, very much of the style of this tour, but didn't go super deep or anything. They just kind of got right to the point. So I don't know if that's a result of them kind of searching on the first part of the tour for what the sound was and how they were going to connect, and then kind of locking in and knowing how to get there now. But the one thing I will say is that don't misinterpret that to mean that the flow is not there, because I think that's one thing that has improved as the tour has gone on. And I think last night was kind of the capstone of that. Just start to finish, the show felt really, really great, and there were no points when I thought that they were there was like a lull, or they were playing the wrong song for the minute or anything like that.
So go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, I think that I agree with Matt about the set list construction. That's kind of what I was alluding to. That second set last night was just a dream. I mean, it flows beautifully. The song selection is perfect for the location, and I couldn't have asked for more.
Brian, what are you hearing out there?
I'm agreeing with a lot of what you guys are saying. I think just like pointing out specifically, the second night of Hershey strikes me as one of the strongest shows of the overall tour, and it speaks to a lot of what we're talking about here. You have jams throughout it: the Haley's Comet, the Wombat, the Ruby Waves, the Birds of a Feather, but you kind of hear the band consciously figuring out a way to either close a song out and move on to the next song that they want to play, which tends to be really well thought out from a set list construction standpoint, or kind of hold themselves back from potentially that next idea that would have gotten them to the final 10 minutes of the tweezer from Alpharetta, or the final jam segment from the Blaze On, or the kind of craziness that we heard from the Simple. And I don't say like holding themselves back in any sort of a negative way. I think that they're really consciously focused, at least from what I'm hearing and seeing on the screen, on flow, on continue to introduce songs into the repertoire, continuing to debut songs, and really focusing on like, where does this song fit in the set list versus how far can this jam go?
So the last time we talked about the tour overall, this was before the Hershey and AC shows, and I guess Brian, what's your what sticks out to you from the last? I guess that's 5 shows, right? What sticks out to you?
I've gone back and listened to the entire Hershey Night 2, the August 11th, I believe it is, show multiple times. I love start to finish. You've got, that mix of humor with You Sexy Thing kind of dotted throughout. You've got that shocking jam out of Haley's Comet that is kind of like the white whale for so many Fish fans at this point in time. Like, will they actually jam it? Oh my God, they did. And then it turns out to be great. The segue there into Lonely Trip was one of my favorite moments of the entire tour, and I'd put it up there with the debut of Evolve on the second night at Nashville. But then I'd also, in the same vein, Atlantic City Night 2, I thought flowed from moment 1 through the finale. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with some of my favorite moments of this entire tour have been the ballads. And I think that they're really approaching slower songs with a lot of patience, with a lot of attention, and with a lot of emotion. And you're hearing it in some of these shows that have big peak moments, but also really quiet, really kind of softer, special moments throughout.
Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. The from Hershey and AC, the Haley's jam in particular was pretty fantastic. And then I just think last night, this, as Jonathan was saying, the flow of the entire set was just like perfect. It was like you had that long, deep jam feeling without anything going like too far in that direction. But one of my favorite parts from last night was the Sea of Stars and the Piper segment. Where they really kind of did the slow build up Piper, but Sea of Stars out on the beach with the wind and the waves and everything was just like so perfect. And everybody in the crowd, I mean, it was kind of a rowdy crowd all weekend, I would say, especially compared to other shows on the tour. But that was one point where people really chilled out. I think, Brian, that kind of speaks to what you're saying about them finding those delicate moments. That the drop into Lonely Trip out of the Haley's Comet Jam was another one of my absolute favorite moments. Like, it took until they actually started singing the song to realize what was going on, because it just seemed like such a perfectly beautiful extension out of the Haley's Jam. But I mean, I think I saw 8 of the 14 shows on the tour, so more than half. And I think it's fair to say that they just got better and better as the tour went on, which doesn't always happen. But I think in this case, they really brought it to a strong conclusion last night. It felt like a great summarization of the entire tour.
Jonathan, before you weigh in, I want to ask Matt a follow-up question, which is, how tired are you?
I'm actually not that tired.
A lot of shows.
It was a lot of shows. It's actually kind of bittersweet. I'm in this room I'm still at the Jersey Shore right now, packing up. And I was just packing up this room that we've been coming and going from for the last couple of weeks. And it was like, I've got a bag over here from the Ryman Auditorium where I bought a t-shirt a couple weeks ago. And then over here, there's some like tickets from Hershey. And it's like, I was kind of packing the entire tour back up into the bag. But I will say, to answer your question, I was very, very well behaved on this tour. So that definitely pays off in terms of not felt awful for the last 2 weeks, for sure.
That's what happens when you have a demanding job. You gotta stay fresh.
It's that
You just gotta
boss
stay
of yours.
fresh. Jonathan, what's your take?
That I think I would echo what everybody else is saying. They've really dialed in what they're trying to do. They can still spend 15 minutes or whatever with like the Birds of a Feather the other night at Hershey, I think it was, where they just get out there, or they can, do what they did in Chalk Dust on second night AC, where it's chalk dust and suddenly it's not chalk dust, and then silkily just slide right into no quarter. I mean, they're turning corners beautifully, and I'm just really excited about everything I'm listening to. Just about. How about you,
Maybe,
RJ?
I'm also excited. I keep going. I mean, that Friday night Atlantic City second set was just, for me, like the kind of the perfect set. And I'm going to go back to that over and over. And it's really fascinating to me. I talk about this a lot, and I probably shouldn't, but like the Fishnet ratings for that Friday night show are 3.7. And I'm like, I felt like that was a 4 point, something show. Just the quality, the song choices, the jams, the segues, the way that it all fit together. I don't know. Maybe am I wrong about that show? Do you guys think that's like, does that show stick out to you? Or at least the second set?
I want to actually turn this back to you with a kind of question about that show. Are you in the Tweezer camp or the Bathtub Gin camp? Because I think that is, I've seen other opinions out there on the internet talking about other songs from the show that second set, and some are not favorable, I'll say. But I found most interesting some people arguing that the Bathtub Gin jam was more interesting to them than the Tweezer, and I'm curious your thought.
Well, I mean, maybe due to lack of imagination, I'm always in the Tweezer camp. Like, it's a camp. It's where I live. Yeah, it's interesting because listening back to it, it is sort of like and I guess a lot of the jams on Sunday night were similar, I think, in that it was like, I wouldn't say laid back, I guess, but it wasn't like super driving jams. Like that Tweezer had like a lot of kind of quiet moments, or at least like Fishman never stops playing the drums. So it's not like really like a quiet moment, but maybe there was less imagination in that jam, but a 20+ minute Tweezer that at a concert I'm at, I'm always all for that.
What about you, Matt?
In terms of Tweezer versus Gin,
yeah,
I haven't re-listened to the set at all. So just going off my memory, I would naturally go Tweezer, just because that's also the place where my brain lives most of the time. But I do recall the Bathtub Gin being pretty awesome as well. But I think that just goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's like not necessarily about specific jams, but just like the flow throughout the set. To give an example, like Hershey, a couple of the shows, I got to feel like I remember the Randall's Island third night, the Sunday night show from a handful of years ago, where like they just played, like they jammed and they would get into songs, but it felt like they were just sort of stopping off on an island briefly before just continuing off into the ocean and jamming. Like, the songs are more of a pivot point to just kind of like refocus their energy, rather than like, okay, here's the Tweezer, here's the Bathtub Gin, here's, this. It's just kind of like part of a continuum, for me at least.
Yeah, I felt like you got that vibe that you're describing in Deer Creek Night 1, which I think, unsurprisingly, is why a lot of people really like that show, especially in that second set. It felt in a lot of ways like they'd play a song, but the song was just kind of like a brief moment of, stopping, and then they'd go off and they'd continue to explore. That first night in Atlantic City, I think that they're just in a really cool and interesting and new place with Bathtub Gin that they hadn't been in a long time. I seem to recall 2018, 2019, we started to see the shift where Bathtub Gin would be played more in the second set. And as a result, it would be expanded on in a different way. throughout most of 3.0, you'd hear a Bathtub Gin like mid to late set one, and it always led to that, just like when you're at the show, every Bathtub Gin sounds like the greatest song that you've ever heard. And then you listen back and okay, it sounds similar to the last time, but they're playing it very well. I feel like when they start it now, they don't exactly know where the song is going to end up, and they don't really have any intention of concluding the song. And that's a cool thing. Tweezer, however, like the way they exited the song portion of Tweezer into the jam, just to kind of go back to a theme I was spitting out a couple minutes ago, like the quiet moments of this tour have been what have really excited me the most. There was so much patience for like 4 or 5 minutes where it felt like Trey he would play a note and then he'd hold it, and then maybe he'd play a little riff and he'd hold on to that and just kind of like let the space build. I absolutely loved that aspect of the Tweezer.
You touched on something, how they've about ending songs, and that's something that I've noticed a lot this tour. And they've been doing it for past few years, but this tour they've been very successful at closing the song, coming back to the song after a couple modulations. Birds of a Feather, I think, is a perfect example. They did it nicely with Tweezer, but I think Tweezer is kind of easier, although I think it might also be more rare that they come back and do the little slow down ending on Tweezer. They've been doing that a lot, and I really like that too.
I feel like Trey is like very proud of himself when he brings it back from into the song at the end. Like if you watch like on the webcast or if you're at the show, you can see he's
pumped.
always smiling, like I did it. It's kind of awesome.
Well, I think it's a good accomplishment when they go out as far as they did on some of these tunes.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
They come back as effortlessly. It sort of sounds that way. Obviously, they're working hard, but they're doing a really nice job of it.
Yeah, for sure.
I always think back structurally to late 2013 when they debuted Wingsuit, and then they did the New Year's Eve run where they didn't cover a single song. I feel like there was a turning point there where the band realized and like embraced their songs as like the heart, like the beating heart of the band, and that jamming is a huge part of why we do this. And a lot of this conversation has centered around this jam was great, this song was great, or this jam was great, but like at the heart of it, they're a song-based band who explores their songs. And I almost wonder if in some of the inspiration for returning to these songs at the conclusion is we played the song, then we expanded on it and saw where it could go, and now we're concluding it. And rather than just segueing it into another song, like this was the version of Tweezer that you heard here. It's not just a stopping point before a larger set.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, but can we talk a little bit more about last night? Just because our viewer Bobby said that last night's second set was a great example of a flow show, like one long jam. I feel like a lot of the shows recently have been like that, and I guess I'm trying to put this into writing at the same time, which is really hard and not something that anyone should try to do. But I feel like right now they're kind of like more balanced in the use of the new equipment and the new effects. Like at the beginning of the tour, it was pretty heavy, especially with Trey, but also Paige. And now it's like some of those jams last night, like the micro jams, had a good balance of like Trey actually just playing guitar, and then like him and Paige sort of getting into that spacey sound that they've both been enjoying. And I'm just curious if like the long jams versus sort of shorter jams and the balance that they're finding now. I guess the question are they actually playing better when they're playing a bunch of 8 to 10 minute jams as opposed to 2 20-minute jams? Is there anything that correlates to like the quality of the improv or the comfort of the band or anything like that, or is it just like, is that overthinking it?
Yes.
I think like, I was starting to say this earlier. You saw this kind of like on a macro scale before with like the difference between like late 1.0 and 2.0 and some of the really, really great 3.0 years. I'm thinking like 2012 to 2015 in particular, where people would say like, oh, they're not playing 30-minute long versions of this, that, or the other before. But it was like it would take them, in the late 90s, 20 minutes to get to a place where like now in their sort of more mature years, they could just get to right away without taking minutes of exploration to find a sound. And I almost feel like we saw that on like a micro scale on this tour, which is like they were looking for deliberate new sounds at the start of the tour, needed to stretch out a lot to find those places. Think of like the Deer Creek Simple, which is very long, and it eventually gets to the spacey place, which, by the last couple of nights in AC, I feel like they were just kind of getting there pretty quickly out of Chalk Dust Torture, out of Drowned. They just kind of know where they want to get to, and the flock of birds mentality helps them to get there a lot quicker than they were, even 2 weeks ago.
They know where the buttons are, right? It's literally, a little bit of that, right? And knowing that, okay, well, from here I can punch this, flex that pedal, and here we are in that same space that we really like. And Paige stands up and does the same thing. And it just feels more comfortable for them, perhaps. Brian?
Well, what Matt is saying brings me right back to what I love so much about the second night of Hershey, where you have that incredible Birds of a Feather. 2 or 3 songs later, you get Ruby Waves. And it's that second jam within a set where they play Ruby Waves, and the song itself is all of like 3.5 minutes long. And there's no taking time to play a solo to try to find a jam. There's just, they're hooked up right away. And if you look at the timestamp on it, it's a 15-minute version, 16-minute version. The jam, is around 13 minutes of the entire track. They just get right there. And that's something that I think, to Matt's point, took a lot of work from 09 to 12 that they were then able to really jump into. And we're seeing this really interesting balance now where, in later years of 3.0, kind of starting with the Baker's Dozen, a 20 to 25 minute jam was almost to be expected within a show. And you're hearing now where they can do that. They can get there. They can throw out a 25-minute version of Carini, and it can be good most of the way through. And sometimes there are some great segments, but if they focus and they play that within 15, 16 minutes, sometimes they get there faster and they may abandon an idea faster. But they're abandoning an idea because they don't necessarily think that they're hooking up in that moment.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I guess one question about last night for you guys, and Matt, I want to ask you because you were there also. Do you think that kind of post Carini or Set Your Soul Free that did it feel like they were kind of trying to figure it out? Because I kind of felt like they were trying to figure out where to go next. And like the segues were cool and there were some moments of improv in there, but it felt to me like until the first tube, it sort of was like a little bit of a searching set. Did it feel like that to you, or did it feel more cohesive?
I think that's a fair statement, but at the same time, like I would contrast that. Let me revise it. So I think it's a fair statement, but I think it worked last night. Like I think ultimately the song selections and the way they were executed really, really worked out well. Sometimes that doesn't work out as well. Like Hershey Night 1 is a great example. We've seen that type of show a lot. Like they start out with 30 to 45 minutes of great jamming in the second set, but then it's just like jukebox fish for an hour after that, and it didn't necessarily work that night. But last night, I think you're right. They were trying to figure out how to stick the landing, but I think they definitely stuck it. And I didn't feel like the only thing that felt like it was maybe slightly out of place was that I felt like they could have ended the set after About to Run. But I'm glad that they played first too, because it was a really, really great cap on the weekend.
Yeah, Jonathan, watching at home, I mean, what did you feel about the second set last night?
I felt like it flowed beautifully. Time kind of, so I was watching / reading a book and listening / just kind of enjoying the evening on the sofa, and time didn't really add up. I looked at the timings this morning, for the tracks, and I was like, how was that Simple only 6.5 minutes long? I just remember existing in the Simple solo segment for a while. And Beneath a Sea of Stars, it's 8 minutes long, but you could have told me it was 20 and I wouldn't have doubted you, but I wouldn't complained either, because it's just just a gorgeous space. The Piper, Matt alluded to the slow, I would say slower than average intro. I did see Trey was tuning during that. So that's probably what's drew it out. I don't know. I just feel like he had a very deliberate, Trey had a very deliberate plan, and they pretty comfortably rolled with it. It was nice. A lot of bliss. In fact, we have a commenter here. Seth notes, felt some moments of bliss last night that he hasn't felt in literally years. And yeah, they were there. I liked it. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts after you go back and really dive back in and listen again.
Well, go ahead, Brian.
I was just gonna say, I think what you guys are describing with like the moment of flow, I really got that in the second night of Atlantic City, the second set. I felt that the song selection was both surprising as it was, very fitting for the overall mood of the set. There was kind of an evil nature to it. Obviously, there's in very fish terms, the controversy around the Sense and Subtle Sounds and what happened when they dropped out and when the Chalk Dust Torture. But I thought that like the Chalk Dust Torture turned into a really interesting jam and reminded me of a lot of, there's a version from July 30th, 2003 at Camden that just goes off on the rails and no longer sounds like Chalk Dust Torture, and all happens within 10 minutes. And Chalk Dust Torture is such an interesting song within Fish history, where you can look at the first 10 years of its existence and it's just a rock song. And then it becomes a jam song. And then it goes back to being a rock song. And then it's somewhere in between at all these times. And the way it went into No Quarter, just like talk about 70s arena rock dreams for these guys. Like that was such a huge moment. But that set to me of the Atlantic City weekend, that was the perfect set that I'll go back and I'll listen to over and over again.
That was Matt's first show. I would like to point out for our listeners and viewers, right, Matt? 7:30:03.
No, that was not my first show.
That's
All right.
a perfect show though, and we
It was
not-
It was an
We're
early
not live,
show,
so we can strike that. We can edit that, right?
Yeah, no.
we'll do something
See
about
what
it.
it says up there.
Good point, Brian, about the sense and the way that it was executed on Saturday night, which basically set up last night what happened with the sense intro and the beautiful segue into MoMA. That was like so well executed. Which reminds me, somebody was making a point to me last night. We should really talk about John Fishman's drumming, because for me, he's been like probably the superstar of the entire tour. He is just a machine right now. And I think that the tightness of his playing and how well he is, just has his body kind of moving, and how well he knows everything right now, has led to so many of these smooth transitions that we've seen into different ways. He's able to steer the band a lot. And I think about RJ, we talked about this a lot after the second night of Nashville, where they did Mr. Completely, and he just kept throwing the Mr. Completely beat back in. But every single time he did it, it was like he pivoted the entire band from whatever they were doing back into this magical Mr. Completely space. And then he'd go right back into whatever they were doing, just seamlessly guiding them in and out of these different places. And I'd heard a lot of that in the last couple of nights in Atlantic City. So he's definitely my MVP for the tour.
I just want to add to that. There's a new shot on the webcast that is like my favorite shot in all of their webcasts, where they have this like drone camera that goes behind the stage and rises up. Jonathan, you probably know what I'm talking about, because you and I have probably webcasted the most shows on this tour. But you can see like the first 20 rows of the crowd, and it gives you this great perspective of how much the band sees and how engaged they are with the crowd kind of from the start of the show. But it's such a great window into what you're talking about, Matt, of just John Fishman's arms and how his body is moving. And no matter what is happening during a show or during a song, he's adding fills and he's adding ideas that, like, when you go back and just listen to him, it adds so much to all of these performances.
That brings up something else that I wanted to ask you guys. I mean, genuinely, because I haven't seen any of the webcasts from this tour, and obviously the last couple of nights, in particular, I was not watching, but I could see like several drones in the air above us. Were they getting some really cool shots of like the size of the crowd, the magnitude of the event? Because being in it, I'll tell you what, I was maybe this is just naive of me. I was very, very surprised at how many people were on the beach the last couple of nights, because it was pretty, it was pretty crazy.
They sold a lot of tickets to those things, and yeah, the drone shots over the audience were very cool and quite different. We haven't seen that on any of the other webcasts that I can recall, but it was very cool. They flew it out a little bit over the water, and
yeah,
it was cool.
When the fireworks were going off, you could see the fireworks, and then you could see the stage and the setup. And there was a nice shot last night during Sense that went up there where like you could see the sunset happening. It was there's a new approach to a couple of the camera angles, and they're quite nice for this tour.
People who are watching, please keep sending your thoughts and any questions, and we'll keep throwing them up here and answering them. Sorry, Jonathan.
Oh, no, it's fine. I just wanted to step back towards the sense and subtle sounds controversy, if you will. Fish.net may have a reckoning coming where even on their lyrics page, they clearly recognize that Sense and Subtle Sounds intro is a different song, but they combine it and they have both the intro and the main song on the same thing. So they're going to have to deal with that. But I thought it was interesting that when they played the intro, Matt, you talked about the beautiful segue into Moment Dance. Well, the final line from the intro is "You'll find the moment never ends," and then they played the Moment Dance, which I guess has a different perspective because the moment maybe does end. Anyways, I thought that was clever of Fish, and I know they did that on purpose because they always do all of those things on purpose, don't they?
Well, I saw a Facebook post that someone captured where I think it was from the day before, who said that they should do exactly that, and then they did it, which is kind of wild because of those lyrical connections. So can we talk about this incredibly controversial 24-minute encore last night? Because, I, for one, am pissed. Matt, I didn't think, I had no idea what was coming, Matt. I don't know if you had any sense, but I didn't know if we were going to get I just couldn't think of any more songs that they could play. So I was like, I don't really know what was going to happen in the encore, if it was just going to be like a, Shine a Light or something. But it was pretty huge.
I mean, what was controversial about the encore? It was awesome. There should be nothing that was controversial about that. They played Fluffhead. They executed it extremely well, raged the hell out of the end of it, and then played probably like one of the greatest versions of Backwards Down the Number Line ever. That was like so unbelievably celebratory on the beach. Everybody was just kind of like, around me at least, was very, very moved at this kind of celebration of us all being back together and seeing friends. I was seeing Fish shows with friends that I may or may not have seen in a long time. Even the friends that I have seen in the last 18 months, like, we haven't been at Fish shows. We weren't doing this stuff. We were with our kids. We were doing whatever. I mean, just to have that experience, I think was a perfect encapsulation of the entire thing. So who has bad opinions about the encore? Send them to me.
Everybody who doesn't like it, that's who.
Nobody, but I'm glad you said that, so I didn't have to say any of that. But I completely agree.
Here's what I want to know. Is there a single person who was actually at the show who didn't like the encore? Or were these people sitting on the couch going like, I don't like Numberline, it's a lame thong, and not actually being at the Fish show enjoying the experience?
So that's a really good point. I've only sat behind the band once. It was a chocolate night at the Baker's Dozen, and they play probably my favorite Numberline I've ever seen live. It's like 8 or 9 minutes, all stays within the pocket of the song, but it just rages the whole way. And I had a perfect view of the entire floor at MSG, and I was just sitting there going, every one of you loves this song. There's not a single person with their arms crossed. Like, no wonder the band plays this song over and over and over again. You're all showcasing to them that you love it as well. So I've never seen at a show someone upset about Numberline. And I thought symbolically, having Fluffhead and Numberline close out the encore of the first run of the first leg of the tour of 3.0, or excuse me, 4.0, was very symbolic. It threw me back to Hampton '09. They opened the show with Fluffhead. They opened the second set with Numberline. These two songs have incredibly deep meanings for the band for various reasons, for very different reasons. We clearly don't have Fish 3.0 with Backwards on the Numberline. I thought it was, from a symbolic standpoint, and then in addition from a playing standpoint, it was a very fitting and emotional encore.
Yeah, I'd like to. I think what you're reading makes sense. It's awesome that it throws you back to that. Whenever I hear Numberline, I think back to when I first heard the song, which was the fall classic tab tour from 2008. Right after Hampton had been announced, we were in Richmond, and Trey was talking about wanting to drive down the road and camp out until the Hampton shows, and they played Numberline, and it was glorious. It was absolutely just ecstatic fun. I loved it. So and I love the song, and everybody just forward tweets to Matt if you see haters. He'll take them out.
I mean, yeah, exactly what Matt said is how I felt about it. I was masked, but I think probably like 10 of the people that I was with, we like had serious embraces during Numberline, because it's kind of, I mean, I'm trying to write this as we speak, and it's just like, it's kind of what it's all about at the end of the day. So it was what a great way to end this leg of the tour. And now we have 11 days or so to listen and debate these things, and it's going to be fun. Brian, should we go back and do what we've been doing in the weekly podcast and do the jam of the week from the last week? Do we have? Is that a group consensus?
I think we can vote on it here live, and we'll go with it.
Perfect.
What's your boxing gloves?
Brian, what's your submission?
My submission is the Atlantic City Ghost. Everything we've been talking about packing all these ideas into a short period in time. It was, to me, the most interesting Ghost since Nashville 2018. I absolutely loved it. And actually, as I'm saying that, I'm wrong. It's since Dick's 2019. So excuse that. I'll edit that out. But yeah, I love the Atlantic City Ghost.
Jonathan.
I'm probably gonna just go with Brian on that, but I would make a case for the Birds of a Feather from was it Hershey, that was outstanding. But I really love what they did with that Ghost, so I'm going there.
Matt.
The Ghost was good and unique. I have to go with the Halley's Comet from Hershey for a number of reasons. Just I love that song. Some of you who have been listening to the podcast for a while know that my daughter's named Haley, so that's always a special song, especially when my wife is at the show with me, which she was that night. And I was looking like very, very intently at Trey as they were getting to the end of the song, and I was just kind of like sending him mental messages like, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. And then it kind of kept going, and I was like, whoa, all right, this is great. It's happening. It's happening. And I'm not saying that, I influenced the band or anything like that, but it was one of those, like, you're like, all right, I want them to do this, and they do it. And it was amazing. And the jam was just fantastic too. So
RJ, are you going to split the decision here? Where are you going to go? Are you going to say,
oh man, what? No, I want us all to be friends. So I'll just agree with all you guys today. All my friends, I will say that of the past week, a couple of my favorite moments that weren't mentioned, the end of Birds of a Feather into Bug is just like, you remember that 46 Days into Bug from Merriweather several years ago?
Oh yeah.
Dropping into Bug after a huge jam is just, it's got to be one of the most beautiful Fish moments. Friday night, Atlantic City, like three of my five probably favorite songs to hear live: Tweezer, Hood, and More. I love More so much, and I got all three of those in one set. That was like pretty special to me. But that Ghost is cool, and worth saying that that's like 11 minutes, and we're kind of pointing it out as the standout. So this is fun, guys. Maybe we should keep doing this podcast. What do you think?
I don't know if it'll catch on. I want to give a shout out to Christian in the chat there with the nomination for No Man's and Soul Planet, that 30-minute combo. That is some great stuff. That is great stuff, and well worth a mention.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We are going to be back, I guess, for the Gorge, but we'll be back on the podcast before then. Subscribe to the Helping Friendly podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us reviews and tell people that you like what we're doing. And thank you to Shift Genuine Cannabis. Enter the Vegas contest, shiftcannabis.com. Join us in Vegas. It would be fun. Some people are going to win some stuff. Anything else we need to say, guys? Did we do it?
We did it. That was good.
That was
good
good.
couple of weeks of tour. That was fun.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's been a good time.
Fun to talk to you guys. See you guys soon. Thanks everybody for tuning in. See y'all soon.